Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here again to take those insights you find valuable and really give them room to breathe, expand on what truly matters. Today we're returning to a perspective that's really unique, deeply resonant actually. It's one that just effortlessly bridges ancient wisdom with the very real, sometimes relentless, challenges of modern leadership. It's a viewpoint that time and again offers both this profound sense of silence and at the same time a startling clarity. We're diving into another powerful reflection from Lóng Tíng. This one's titled, The CEO's Table, What We Feed, What We Lead. It's an intriguing title, isn't it? And as you'll soon discover, it gets right to the heart of what leadership really means. And it starts in a place you might not immediately think of, your own body. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, indeed. Lóng Tíng, he just has this remarkable way of guiding us back to these foundational truths, doesn't he? And this particular deep dive, it's such a powerful example of that profound approach. Our exploration today really centers on his reflection about how intrinsically intertwined our personal habits are with our leadership capacity. Specifically, what we consume, how we nourish ourselves. Our mission, really, is to uncover the profound connections he draws. They seem almost undeniable once he points them out. Connections between physical nourishment, mental acuity, and a leader's very presence, their way of being. It's not just about understanding what he suggests, although that's important. It's about deeply comprehending why these seemingly personal choices matter, why they impact things on a systemic, organizational level. He really invites us to see a CEO's choices, even the most personal ones, like what they eat for breakfast, as the initial ripples that ultimately shape the entire organizational ecosystem. It's quite a perspective.
Yeah, it really is. And Lóng Tíng begins with a statement that might just make some of us, well, squirm a little, because it hits so close to home. He says, the boardroom begins at the breakfast table. And then he paints this picture, it's incredibly familiar, describing how too many leaders run on coffee, sugar, adrenaline, and then wonder why clarity slips away. What really caught my eye here, and I think it's crucial, is how immediately he connects our internal physiological state to our mental performance and ultimately our leadership effectiveness.
Yes, that immediacy.
It's such a direct challenge, isn't it, to that often held belief that our personal habits are somehow separate from our professional output. Like we can just compartmentalize our bodies, put them on hold while our minds do the important work.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating here is that immediate, almost visceral connection he establishes between our internal physiological state, the actual functioning of our bodies and our external capacity for effective leadership. He's deliberately challenging that pervasive modern perception that leadership is primarily, maybe even solely, a mental exercise, all about strategy, numbers, intellect.
Right, just the thinking part.
Just the thinking part. Instead, he asserts, leadership is lived in the body, in breath. And this isn't some abstract philosophical musing, is it? It's a very practical, grounded truth. It speaks to those quiet, often overlooked choices we make long before our public persona even emerges, long before we step into that, as he puts it, sleek glass tower, surrounded by reports, screens, the relentless demands. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it profoundly suggests that neglecting this fundamental physiological foundation, the well-being of the vessel that carries us, it makes any top-down strategic effort inherently less stable.
Less stable.
How so? Well, think about it. You can conceive the most brilliant strategy, articulate the most innovative vision, but if the leader carrying that brilliance is compromised by exhaustion, by brain fog, by chronic stress, its execution will inevitably falter. It just won't land with the same impact. He's essentially positing that true presence, the kind that commands respect, inspires confidence, drives genuine innovation, originates from a much simpler, more fundamental place. It comes from the fuel we provide our bodies and the care we extend to our deepest selves.
And he speaks from experience here. He shares his own journey, learning this the hard way, as he puts it, describing days of running only on coffee, on sugar, on late-night snacks. That sounds familiar to many, I suspect. And the results he observed were stark. Decisions that followed, sharp but brittle, quick, not deep. Wow, that phrase, sharp but brittle, it really sticks with you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
It implies this kind of immediate decisiveness, maybe a quick reaction that looks good on the surface. But without the underlying strength, the resilience, or maybe the foresight for the long haul, it sounds less like sustainable leadership and more like a formula for chronic reactivity.
Exactly. Reactivity.
Leading to burnout for the leader and, inevitably, probably for the entire organization they lead.
It's a crucial distinction, that sharp but brittle. It perfectly captures the illusion of productivity that so many leaders chase. These brittle decisions, they might appear decisive in the moment, right? They might even get initial praise for speed or boldness, but they crucially lack the foresight, the adaptive capacity, the systemic understanding required for long-term sustainable impact. They are reactive rather than proactive, often just addressing symptoms instead of digging down to the root causes.
Right, putting out fires instead of preventing them.
Precisely. And Lóng Tíng observed that his body, when neglected in this way, eventually crashed, and so did clarity. And this isn't just about feeling physically tired, though that's part of it. It's about a profound degradation of cognitive function. The ability to engage in deep critical thinking, to see beyond the immediate crisis, to think strategically and empathetically, to connect disparate pieces of information, that clarity just evaporates.
Which raises a huge question.
It raises a profoundly important question for all of us, really, not just CEOs. If our internal system is constantly compromised, if we're perpetually on the verge of crashing due to self-neglect, how can we possibly expect it to sustain the immense weight of external leadership responsibilities? How can we be expected to carry the weight of an entire organization, guide a team through unprecedented uncertainty, or make decisions that impact countless lives when our own internal operating system is in chronic disarray?
It seems impossible when you frame it like that.
Doesn't it? His powerful realization, if we neglect the system that carries us, how can we carry others? That's truly the linchpin of this entire reflection. It's the core idea. It's a direct call to view self-care not as a luxury, not something to be indulged in only when time permits, not as a reward for hard work, but as a non-negotiable, fundamental prerequisite for effective leadership, for compassionate leadership, for sustainable leadership.
Or a prerequisite, not an add-on.
Exactly. It is the very foundation upon which all other leadership skills, no matter how sophisticated, are built. Without it, everything else, as he implies, is just a precarious house of cards, waiting to tumble.
So moving on from that foundational idea, Lóng Tíng then masterfully employs this metaphor of essential food groups. It offers a very digestible, actually quite profound way to understand different, yet equally vital aspects of leadership. It's a brilliant framework, I think. It helps make these abstract concepts much more concrete. Let's start with what he calls the muscles of resilience, protein. He mentions specific examples, salmon, tofu, eggs, and immediately links them to resilience. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because like you said, he's clearly not just talking about physical muscles, is he?
No, absolutely not. He explains that protein feeds the body, yes, but also the will. This isn't about building biceps or physical bulk in the gym sense. It's about cultivating that inner fortitude, the mental and emotional toughness, the sheer willpower needed for leadership, especially in complex, challenging environments, which seems to be the norm these days. He states, leadership is like a muscle. It grows only when tested, broken down, rebuilt. Now, that analogy is incredibly powerful. Why? Because it implies that true leadership capacity isn't inherent or static. It's not something you're just born with or without. It's something that must be actively developed, strengthened, refined through consistent, sometimes uncomfortable effort, and yes, through struggle, through facing difficulty.
Can you give an example of how that protein of the will might play out?
Sure. Let's consider a CEO navigating a major public relations crisis, a huge reputation hit. A leader lacking this protein of resilience, this inner will, might panic. They might make impulsive defensive decisions that actually worsen the situation, further damaging trust. Or they might even just collapse under the intense scrutiny, unable to function effectively. But a resilient leader, one whose will has been fed through consistent self-challenge and reflection, they would systematically assess the situation, communicate transparently with stakeholders, even when the news is grim. They'd make difficult but strategically sound choices, knowing that even a crisis presents an opportunity for strengthening the organization's integrity, maybe rebuilding trust on a firmer foundation.
They show up, as he puts it.
They literally show up to those emotionally draining town halls, absorbing the criticism, maybe the anger, and still managing to project a calm resolve that inspires confidence in their team and the wider public. That takes inner strength. Just as physical muscles require protein to repair and grow stronger after exertion, leadership capacity strengthens through challenges, through failures, through difficult feedback, and through that deliberate process of learning and rebuilding.
So avoiding challenges is like skipping your protein shake, metaphorically speaking.
Pretty much, yes. If a leader consistently avoids challenges, if they shy away from difficult conversations or refuse to acknowledge setbacks, they are effectively starving their leadership muscle of the protein it needs to grow. It stays weak, untested. This suggests that without the protein of disciplined effort and honest self-reflection, and this might involve actively seeking out mentorship, or engaging in really honest self-assessment, maybe even intentionally taking on stretch assignments that push comfort zones. Without that, leaders cannot truly develop the deep resilience needed to navigate complex environments. They can't rebound effectively from setbacks or inspire their teams to persevere through adversity. Lóng Tíng is essentially arguing that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about the consistent, sometimes painful process of getting back up stronger each time, rebuilding.
And he really emphasizes that this isn't just about the literal food on the plate, right? He notes that the protein of leadership is not found on a plate, but in the daily discipline to show up, to grow stronger through failure. So it's about those unglamorous internal moments, showing up for those difficult conversations, confronting setbacks head-on, consistently engaging in personal growth, even when it's uncomfortable, maybe feels like a risk.
Exactly, the daily discipline.
But in a fast-paced environment where results are king, expert, isn't there a huge temptation to cut corners on this personal growth protein? In favor of immediate action, quick wins? What's the cost of doing that?
That's a critical point. It's a direct, almost unwavering call to action for personal development and self-mastery. The food serves as the entry point, the tangible metaphor, to understand this deeper, more profound truth. And the cost of neglecting this personal growth protein, it's insidious, often not immediately apparent, but ultimately devastating. If you neglect your own growth, if you consistently avoid the hard work of self-assessment, if you shy away from learning from mistakes, if you retreat from pushing past your comfort zone, your leadership will weaken. No question. You might appear strong, decisive, even charismatic for a time, maybe ride on past successes, but without that internal protein of discipline development, your resilience will be fragile, just like those brittle decisions he spoke of earlier.
And that fragility doesn't just affect the leader, right? It spreads.
It absolutely manifests across the organization. You might see a leader who micromanages constantly. Why? Because they lack the resilience to trust their team and allow for mistakes, which are essential for growth. Or a leader who consistently blames external factors for failures, totally unable to absorb feedback and rebuild their own strategies or thinking. The team, in turn, internalizes this fragility. They become risk-averse, less innovative, ultimately less engaged, less willing to bring their whole selves to work. This is about consciously engaging in that break, down, and rebuild cycle that is essential for any muscle, physical or metaphorical, to grow stronger. It means actively seeking out challenges, viewing failures not as endpoints, but as invaluable data points for learning, and consistently committing to the process of becoming a more capable and authentically resilient leader, one who can face adversity with an unwavering will.
Okay, moving on. Next, he talks about invisible order through fiber. He cites spinach, oats, apples, and he admits they don't look like power. And I think that's a really key observation. We often associate power with the big stuff, right? Grand, visible gestures, bold statements, flashy initiatives. But fiber's role, both in our bodies and metaphorically in leadership, is crucial and much less flashy. Almost operates in the background.
It's a beautiful, almost poetic metaphor, isn't it, for the unseen staffing that supports any successful endeavor, whether it's a healthy human body or a thriving organization. Fiber, as he describes it, keeps the body steady, balanced, clean. It ensures things run smoothly. In leadership, this translates directly to the routines no one claps for, on the structures that keep chaos from swallowing everything.
The things you only notice when they break down.
Exactly. These are the often unacknowledged, uncelebrated disciplines. Things like clear communication protocols, regular strategic review cycles, consistent feedback mechanisms, maybe robust data integrity processes, or even simply maintaining an organized and responsive inbox. These are the quiet, steady forces that ensure smooth internal processes, much like fiber ensures a healthy and efficient digestive system. This section highlights the profound importance of consistency and foundational practices over mere showmanship or sporadic bursts of activity.
So it's about the underlying systems.
Yes. It implies that leaders who prioritize visible power plays, grand announcements, or constant reinvention over these quiet foundational structures, they are, in fact, building on shaky ground. They might achieve short-term, splashy wins, sure, but without that invisible order, the system eventually becomes clogged, inefficient, prone to entropy. Just as a body without fiber becomes sluggish and unhealthy, the organization starts to seize up.
Okay, that makes sense. But thinking about, say, a fast-paced startup culture where agility and rapid innovation are often prized above all else, isn't there a risk that too much invisible order, too much process, could actually stifle that creative chaos, that quick entrepreneurial spirit?
That's an excellent, truly vital question. And it speaks to the delicate balance that Lóng Tíng often alludes to in his work. It's not about rigid bureaucracy. He says fiber teaches humility. It's not the flashy meals, not the sugar highs. It is the quiet backbone, the uncelebrated daily discipline that keeps the system clear. He's not advocating for bureaucracy or rigid processes that stifle innovation. Not at all. Instead, he's highlighting the right kind of structure, the kind that creates a stable platform from which agility and innovation can truly launch, rather than just flail around chaotically.
Ah, okay, so structure enables agility rather than hindering it.
Precisely. Think of it this way. A high-performing athletic team needs rigorous training routines, clear communication during plays, consistent conditioning that's their fiber, not to restrict their creativity on the field, but to free them to perform at their peak, to improvise effectively, to trust each other under pressure. Without that underlying order, agility just devolves into mere reactivity. Innovation becomes chaotic experimentation without clear learning or direction. The entrepreneurial spirit needs boundaries to flourish sustainably, not to be smothered, but to provide focus and ensure resources aren't wasted.
Boundaries for freedom, in a way.
Exactly. The wise leader ensures the operational details are sound, that the team has clear guidelines and a shared understanding, that communication channels are open and reliable, even when those efforts don't make headlines or get applause. These are the underlying systems that allow a leader to respond effectively to challenges, adapt quickly, and foster true innovation, rather than constantly being trapped in a cycle of putting out fires, which is exhausting and unproductive. It's the deep understanding that true, sustainable power often lies in the consistent, well-maintained background processes, the ones that allow for sustained peak performance, rather than in sporadic, high-energy bursts that burn everyone out.
Okay, next up, the subtle power of good fats. He mentions avocado, walnuts, sardines. What exactly does he mean by subtle power? This sounds like a very different kind of influence than the sheer strength of protein or the stabilizing structure of fiber. It hints at something deeper, more nuanced.
It really does. Good fats, physiologically, are absolutely essential for the body to absorb vital nutrients, maintain cellular function, ensure hormonal balance, support brain health. They're critical. Lóng Tíng sees a direct and profound parallel in leadership here. He states they allow the body to absorb what matters, to balance what cannot be seen. This subtle power aligns closely with what modern leadership theory often calls systems thinking, or perhaps emotional intelligence at scale.
Emotional intelligence at scale. Interesting.
Yeah, it's not just about managing one's own emotions, but truly understanding the complex interplay of human dynamics within the organization, understanding market forces, unspoken tensions, organizational psychology. It's reading the room, but on an organizational level. It speaks to a leader's capacity for nuance, for deep listening, for reading between the lines, and for maintaining equilibrium within an organization's intricate ecosystem.
So less command and control, more like conducting an orchestra.
That's a great way to put it. A CEO isn't just a decision maker in this view, but, as he beautifully puts it, a balance keeper of an entire ecosystem. This suggests a holistic perspective where a leader needs to understand and balance various stakeholders, employees, customers, investors, the community. They need to understand diverse cultural backgrounds within a global team, manage competing resources, and even sense the implicit biases or unspoken anxieties within a team or the market. It's the wisdom to know when to listen more than speak, when to allow an idea to percolate and develop, or when to gently steer a conversation rather than forcefully dominate it, all to foster an environment where all parts of the system can actually thrive together.
And he draws a very sharp distinction about what happens when you lack this subtle power. It sounds almost like a warning.
He does, with a stark and rather sobering comparison. Without good fats, even vitamins go to waste. Without balance, even vision becomes empty. Now, this is profoundly insightful, and you can really hear the echoes of Lóng Tíng's East Asian roots here, which often emphasize harmony and equilibrium. Think about it. You can have all the protein of resilience, that strength of will to push through. You can have the fiber of invisible order, ensuring processes are meticulously in place. But if you lack the capacity for subtle understanding and balance, if you can't effectively absorb the nuances of human interaction, read nonverbal cues. If you can't understand the unspoken needs of your team or grasp the underlying market shifts, then even the most brilliant strategies, the most valuable resources, the vitamins of your organization might not be effectively utilized. They just don't get absorbed properly.
So the vision remains just words on paper.
Exactly. A grand vision, if not supported by balanced relationship, equitable resource allocation, psychological safety, a healthy organizational culture. It will simply fail to materialize. It remains an empty promise. Imagine a multinational CEO entering a new cultural market. Without these good fats, without that capacity for nuance, deep listening, cultural awareness, they might just impose a one-size-fits-all strategy based on their home market. What happens? Misunderstanding, resistance, resentment, ultimately failure. But a leader with subtle power observes local customs first, listens more than they speak, tries to identify unspoken anxieties or hopes, and then absorbs that information to build truly balanced, respectful relationships and tailor strategies accordingly. It speaks to the wisdom of knowing when to absorb, when to observe, and when to adjust. Recognizing that true power often lies not in overt control, but in harmonizing diverse elements and ensuring the optimal functioning of the entire organizational body.
Okay, and finally, the last food group metaphor. Fire for the journey with carbohydrates. He mentioned sweet potatoes, quinoa, whole grain bread. This is clearly about sustained energy, right? Not the quick fix, but the kind of fuel that powers us for the long haul, for the marathon of leadership, not just the sprint.
Precisely. Lóng Tíng describes complex carbohydrates as fuel for long roads. They represent momentum, the enduring energy to keep us moving when the day stretches endlessly. And leadership, particularly the kind of leadership that builds enduring value, is absolutely a sustained fire. Sometimes it's a slow-burning ember, providing steady warmth and light. Sometimes it needs to be an explosive burst of innovation or decisive action. But it always needs to be mindfully maintained, consciously fueled.
And he contrasts this sharply with the sugar rush leadership he mentioned earlier.
He does, very keenly. That sugar rush leadership, whether it comes from actual sweets or from the adrenaline of constant crisis management, it provides quick, fleeting energy, but it inevitably leads to crashes, leaving both the leader and the organization exhausted, disoriented, and prone to poor judgment in that post-rush slump. Complex carbohydrates, however, offer a steady, prolonged release of energy. This mirrors the need for leaders to cultivate sustained focus, strategic patience, and long-term stamina. This is absolutely crucial for navigating prolonged periods of change, for nurturing complex long-term projects, or simply for maintaining an even keel through the relentless daily challenges, rather than chasing short-term gains or immediate applause.
Right, not just reacting to the next urgent thing.
Exactly. This isn't about quick wins that fade fast. It's about building an enduring legacy, fostering a culture of sustainable achievement, running the marathon.
So it's about making choices that fuel you for that marathon, not just the next 100-meter dash. But expert, in today's culture, which feels very always on, very instant gratification focused, how do leaders actually cultivate this long energy? Especially when there's so much pressure for immediate results and the temptation of those quick fixes, those sugar highs, is everywhere.
That's the core challenge, isn't it? It's so easy to get caught in that cycle. Lóng Tíng understands this deeply, and he puts it succinctly. The wise leader chooses long energy over short applause. That phrase really captures it. It emphasizes strategic patience, resilience, the ability to see a long-term vision through, even when immediate rewards aren't apparent, or when the path is difficult, or frankly unpopular in the short term. To cultivate this long energy, leaders must consciously resist the allure of transient excitement and fleeting validation. It takes discipline.
What does that look like practically?
Practically, it involves establishing routines that prioritize restorative practices, like consistent sleep, which is foundational. Mindful breaks during the day, not just powering through. Regular physical activity, whatever form that takes. And indeed, consciously choosing nourishing foods, the complex carbs, the proteins, the good fats he talks about. It's about intentionally building an internal reservoir of sustained capacity, rather than constantly depleting an external supply of adrenaline or willpower. This kind of leadership, fueled by long energy, creates profound stability and trust within an organization. It allows a team to navigate complex challenges with confidence and purpose, knowing their leader is fueled for the entire journey, not just the next quarterly report.
They know the leader won't burn out and leave them hanging.
Exactly. It's understanding that true progress often requires consistent, methodical effort fueled by sustainable internal resources, rather than a series of frantic, adrenaline-fueled bursts that might look impressive but ultimately lead nowhere sustainable. It's a deep investment in the future, both of oneself as a leader and of the organization as a whole.
So bringing all these incredible metaphors together, protein for resilience, fiber for order, fats for balance, carbs for energy, Lóng Tíng makes this powerful, almost unavoidable declaration. If you eat in chaos, you will lead in chaos. If you starve yourself, you will starve your team. If you only choose sugar, you will lead from impulse, not vision. Wow, That's such a direct, almost inescapable cause and effect he's laying out there. It's not just a nice idea or a piece of helpful advice. It feels like he's stating a fundamental law of existence that applies directly to leadership.
It's a very clear, undeniable, and frankly rather stark articulation of that profound principle. Our internal states inevitably manifest externally. This isn't just a clever metaphor anymore at this point in his reflection. It's a statement of truth he has lived and meticulously observed. Observed not just in himself, which he's very open about, but likely in countless leaders and organizations he's encountered or worked with. He sees a direct, almost karmic relationship between our personal practices, our moment-to-moment choices about self-care, and our leadership effectiveness, our impact on others.
How does that chaos spill over?
Well, when a leader's internal system is chaotic due to poor nutrition, and that could be the literal food they eat, or the insufficient rest they get, or even the metaphorical food of their mental and emotional inputs, like constant negative news or toxic relationships, that internal chaos inevitably spills over into their decision-making. It clouds judgment. It affects their communication style. Maybe they become abrupt, unclear, reactive. And it shapes the very culture of their team or organization. Chaos breeds chaos. A leader who's constantly running on fumes, perpetually seeking quick fixes internally, or operating from a place of chronic stress and reactivity. They will almost certainly foster an environment of urgency, short-sightedness, constant firefighting, and a lack of long-term strategic thinking within their team.
And the team picks up on that.
Absolutely. The team observes this behavior, they feel the energy, they internalize it, and often they mirror it. It creates a self-perpetuating cycle of dysfunction, where everyone is incredibly busy, stressed out, maybe working long hours. But little is truly accomplished with deep purpose or strategic clarity. This manifests as inconsistent directives, frequent strategy shifts that confuse and exhaust the team, a pervasive sense of anxiety, maybe higher turnover rates, difficulty attracting talent, all potentially traceable back to the leader's own internal state of chaos or depletion.
And he makes this so vivid with that very poignant and vulnerable confession from his past. It makes the connection even more real and relatable. He says, "There were days when my breakfast was just adrenaline, my lunch, a forgotten meeting, my dinner, a hurried snack between deadlines. And still, I thought I could lead."
That personal anecdote, it just makes the abstract consequences feel incredibly tangible. Because who among us, especially in demanding roles, hasn't felt that rush of adrenaline replacing a proper meal, or forgotten to eat during an impossibly busy day? Indeed, that personal anecdote is incredibly powerful precisely because it makes his profound insights universally relatable. It's not theoretical. It's a confession many of us, particularly those in high-pressure roles, can understand on a deeply personal level. We've been there. It highlights that pervasive, almost heroic belief in modern culture that we can somehow override our body's fundamental needs, that we can push through with sheer willpower, mental acuity, or relentless drive, that mind over matter always works.
But he's saying it doesn't, not really,
Yeah.
not sustainably.
Exactly. Lóng Tíng's own lived experience vividly demonstrates that this approach is fundamentally unsustainable and ultimately counterproductive. It leads to that brittle leadership. And what happens when we consistently ignore these internal signals, these whispers from our body? The body, he says with such certainty, does not lie. It whispers first in fatigue and scattered focus, in irritability, in minor errors or difficulty concentrating, subtle signs we often dismiss. And if ignored, he continues, it shouts. Through illness, burnout, breakdowns, until you no longer lead, you only react.
Wow. From leading to reacting. That's a huge shift.
It's a fundamental shift. And it raises an important question for you, the listener, to deeply consider. How many leaders today are merely reacting to crises that their own unaddressed internal state, their chronic self-neglect, may have indirectly contributed to, rather than proactively leading with foresight, intention, and clarity? How many organizational fires or periods of strategic drift are actually symptoms of the leader's own internal burnout or lack of clarity, stemming from neglecting their own foundation? It speaks to the critical importance of self-awareness, doesn't it? Of truly listening to those subtle cues, those whispers, before they escalate into shouts that demand a crisis response, consuming all available energy and attention, derailing everything. It's a powerful call to understand that neglecting your body isn't just a personal health issue, it's a profound leadership failure. A failure with tangible, measurable, organizational consequences that ripple through every layer of the enterprise.
But it's not all doom and gloom, thankfully. He does offer a clear and compassionate path forward, emphasizing that if you choose strength, clarity, balance, sustained energy, your leadership will reflect it. This sounds like a daily conscious practice, doesn't it? Not a one-time fix or some magical elixir you take once. It's about conscious, ongoing choices that build over time, creating a different internal state.
Absolutely. It's about the power of choice, consistently applied. He beautifully states that the body remembers and teaches. It learns from our choices. Leadership, for him, isn't an abstract concept found only in books, theories, or external accolades like titles or bonuses. It is embodied, lived in the flesh, in the breath, in the gut. And it begins with seemingly small, mindful acts that may appear insignificant on their own, but which accumulate over time to create profound shifts. Like compound interest for well-being, acts like the first glass of water, the first mindful bite, the way you treat yourself before you treat the world.
Starting with the self.
Starting with the self. This fundamentally shifts the focus from grand gestures and external performance to consistent internal discipline and intentionality. It's an inside-out approach. It posits that true leadership strength, the kind that inspires and endures, emanates from within, from the conscious decision to nourish oneself physically, mentally, and emotionally. This concept aligns so deeply with many Eastern philosophies that emphasize the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, where internal harmony and self-mastery are seen as foundational prerequisites for external effectiveness and wisdom.
It's about building that solid, resilient core first.
Exactly. Building a solid, resilient core from which all other actions, decisions, and relationships can flow more effectively, more authentically. He's calling for presence and intentionality in our daily routines, a mindful approach to the very act of living, where even eating, something we do multiple times a day, becomes a sacred practice, a way to check in, to nourish, to choose.
And I really appreciate how incredibly honest he is about his own journey. It makes his message so much more powerful and accessible. He says, I am not writing this as advice from above. I am writing it as confession, as reminder. That humility is striking, he admits. Sometimes I still eat too fast, scrolling emails between bites. Maybe you know that feeling too. That vulnerability makes his message resonate so deeply, because he's not speaking from a place of perfect mastery or unattainable enlightenment. He's positioning himself as a fellow traveler on the path, sharing what he's learned, reminding himself as much as us.
It makes the message resonate profoundly, precisely because it acknowledges the inherent human struggle. It's not an unattainable ideal set by some distant guru preaching from a mountaintop. He's not presenting himself as someone who has perfectly mastered every aspect of self-care, who never slips up, but as someone on a continuous path of learning and reminding himself, just like us. That makes it feel possible for us too. His examples of conscious choices are powerful precisely because they are relatable and imperfect. They highlight the ongoing daily effort required.
Like the examples he gives.
Exactly. For instance, he talks about practicing patience by choosing oats and fruit over rushing and scrolling emails simultaneously. Now, this is about more than just the food itself, isn't it? It's a deliberate act of slowing down, being present, giving your full attention, even to the simple act of eating. It's an internal recalibration, a moment of intentional pause amidst the relentless pace of modern life. And as you train yourself to be present at the breakfast table, that presence subtly extends maybe to how you listen in a meeting or how you approach a complex problem later in the day.
Small practice, big impact.
Potentially, yes. Then there's choosing resilience over shortcuts, opting for fish or tofu instead of grabbing fast food on the run. And he openly admits, I don't always get it right. There are days I still grab the shortcut. This provides such a realistic perspective on building new habits. It acknowledges that perfection isn't the goal, but rather the consistent choice to strive for better, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. The act of choosing itself becomes a daily reminder of the leader one aspires to be, an internal commitment that strengthens your resolve in other areas too. This discipline in self-nourishment, maybe it translates into the discipline needed to choose a challenging long-term strategic investment over an easy short-term financial gain for the organization.
Interesting connection.
And finally, choosing balance over the illusion of speed. Like drinking tea, maybe a calming herbal tea, instead of reaching for that third or fourth coffee. This choice signifies a deeper understanding of sustainable energy versus a temporary, often counterproductive jolt that comes with a crash later. It's about recognizing the subtle wisdom of the body and opting for a calm, steady state rather than a frantic, high-strung one. This measured approach, this inner calm, then hopefully translates into a leader who can thoughtfully assess a situation under pressure rather than reacting impulsively from a place of caffeine-fueled anxiety. These aren't just isolated personal habits, are they? They connect to everything else.
No, they clearly aren't just personal. He makes that explicit by asking, have you noticed how even these small choices ripple outward into the way you speak, the tone you set in a meeting, Those subtle things that people pick up on. He then confesses quite powerfully, I didn't, not for years, not until my body finally forced me to listen, through crashes perhaps. So these aren't just personal habits affecting only the leader. They have profound, undeniable organizational implications. The internal literally becomes external. It influences the very atmosphere, the very energetic signature of a team and an entire organization.
Absolutely, that's the crux of it. These small acts become large echoes. Teams feel it, cultures absorb it. This is where the personal becomes undeniably systemic. It's unavoidable. A leader's internal state, profoundly influenced by their daily habits, their choices at that breakfast table, and throughout their entire day, shapes the energetic and cultural atmosphere of the whole organization. If a leader consistently projects calm, sustained energy, thoughtful decision-making, a balanced approach, it naturally fosters an environment of trust, stability, and considered action within the team. It creates psychological safety. People feel safer, more grounded, and are more likely to engage in deep work, courageous innovation, genuine collaboration. Why? Because the leader's internal harmony creates a space for it externally.
And the opposite is also true.
And the opposite is devastatingly true. If a leader projects stress, brittleness, reactivity, if they are perpetually running on adrenaline and making those sharp but brittle decisions, the team will inevitably mirror that. They will become reactive, anxious, prone to burn out themselves, less likely to take initiative or engage creatively. They'll play it safe. It's such a powerful reminder that leadership is always, at its core, embodied. It's not just what you say or think, it's how you are. Your body, your choices, your internal state are not just yours, they are the blueprint for the culture you create. They determine the energy you transmit and ultimately the sustainable success you achieve or fail to achieve. Lóng Tíng makes it abundantly clear. You cannot truly lead others effectively, sustainably, humanely until you learn to lead yourself. Starting with the most basic fundamental choices of how you fuel your existence and how you choose to digest life itself.
What an incredibly insightful and profoundly practical deep dive into Lóng Tíng's unique perspective. Really makes you stop and think. It brings us full circle, doesn't it, to that powerful yet often overlooked statement. The boardroom begins at the breakfast table. Quote. This isn't just about healthy eating advice, though that's part of the metaphor. It's about cultivating a mindful, intentional approach to the self that fundamentally redefines how we lead, emphasizing that our internal state is the very source code of our external impact. It challenges us to look inward first, to truly know and nourish ourselves before we ever try to direct outward, before we try to lead others.
This deep dive truly illustrates how the most profound and impactful lessons can emerge from the most basic, elemental aspects of our daily lives. Elevating the simple act of eating into a powerful metaphor for leadership and self-mastery, it's quite brilliant. His reflection, offered not as a didactic lecture from on high, but as a sincere confession and a gentle reminder, it urges us all, leaders or not, to deeply consider the foundational choices we make before the world ever sees us. Before we ever step into that boardroom or that meeting or even just interact with our families or communities, it's a challenge to rethink our relationship with our bodies, not just for personal well-being, which is important enough, but as the very source code of our leadership, our presence, our influence in the world. It pushes us to acknowledge that true, sustainable leadership is built from the inside out, and that neglecting that inner foundation makes any external effort, no matter how grand or well-intentioned, inherently unstable and ultimately unsustainable. It just won't last.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought, perhaps, for you to carry forward from this deep dive. What small, mindful choice will you make at your breakfast table tomorrow, literally or metaphorically? Knowing the profound echoes it might create in your leadership, your team, your family, your entire ecosystem. How will you choose to digest life well, slowly, with awareness, to truly fuel the leader, the person you aspire to be, the leader your world needs? We invite you to consider that question, to hold it close. And we'll be here next time for another deep dive.